sustainability is something that people are starting to care a lot about. You know, they care about buying more local products. They care if their food is organic. Ethical consumption to also bleed into the people's whose hand is making the product, who's giving you the service.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Eliza Barbanel. The Chicago Hospitality, Accountability, and Advocacy Database, or the CHAAD Project, is an organization created by and for hospitality workers in Chicago to advance accountability and end labor abuses within the industry. We had co-founder and director of communications Reagan Draper on the show to talk about CHAAD's work and building a more equitable industry. It's essential listening for anyone who loves food and restaurants. Reagan from the CHAAD Project, this is Taste. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's so fun to get to talk to you here in Chicago. I don't often get to be in this city, and I've been trying to eat as many places as I can before I go. I'm curious if you'd want to nominate a place for me to go eat at to kick things off.
To nominate, oh my God, there's so many good food spots. I would say go get some noodles from Lao Peng Yu.
Okay, what's the noodle situation?
Yeah, it's like an authentic Chinese spot. So they have these thick handmade Chinese noodles that are really good. They have a lot of phenomenal dishes. But I would also suggest to get there early.
Okay.
They can get quite busy, and sometimes there's a long wait.
Okay, I love that tip. I feel like there's always that question of like if you could only have noodles or bread or rice, and my answer is always noodles. So it sounds like it's my kind of spot.
Yeah. I would also agree with that. I think noodles. I pick noodles.
Noodles for both of us.
Yes.
So to start the show today, I'm wondering if you could just kind of give us a broad overview about like what the CHAAD Project is and what kinds of folks are your members.
Yeah. So the CHAAD Project is an advocacy organization for hospitality workers, with our primary focus being restaurant and bar workers in Chicago. Our members are primarily hourly restaurant workers, although we do have a few like managers and owners who are also a part of our base. We're really just focused on educating restaurant workers on their rights and pushing forth a narrative shift and a cultural shift around hospitality and kind of extending that sense of hospitality to the workers who take such good care of all of us.
Yeah, I love the sentiment of like taking care of each other and also taking care of the people who take care of us. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the initiatives or programs that you guys do?
Yeah. One of our big programs that we just launched this February, it's called Shift Change. It is a reporting platform where workers in Chicago can report instances of abuse or discrimination of their workplace. They can get connected to resources, whether that's just like, hey, I want some peer support, or I want a mental health professional, or I want legal or organizing resources. We connect them to those. And then their experiences work to help us paint a map of Chicago, one, to show the data points and the systemic issues of workplace abuse. It's not just happening at one or two restaurants, it's happening across the industry. And then three, to kind of show workers like what places they might want to avoid when they're looking for employment opportunities.
Yeah, I love talking about the power of data, and it's also interesting because the acronym of CHAAD is coming from this database that I think was first a spreadsheet or something like that. How does like collecting data and then making observations from that act as a central force in the work that you're doing?
Mm-hmm. The CHAAD Project first started as a spreadsheet, just a Google spreadsheet that we put out in the universe. It really shows that this isn't just us saying things. The CHAAD Project was kind of born out of this, what we like to call the whisper network, that these stories of workplace abuses was common, but it was just common to really the workers. And through working in the industry and through getting to know more people, you hear the whispers. You know where not to work. You know what chefs or owners might not be the best people. But that's not public information. And if you did try to share it with people kind of outside the industry, it was viewed as gossip. And so trying to share this information, but having the data points to back it up kind of just puts more power into our stories, that this isn't just us being emotional or overreacting or being dramatic, that these are real experiences that are happening across the industry, that these workplace abuses are having a huge impact on people's lives, emotionally, physically, financially, and we have the stats to prove that.
Definitely. And so it started as this kind of open spreadsheet that anyone could look at. Shift Change as a platform is an app. Is that something that like anybody can download and get access to, or is it kind of for the members of CHAAD?
It is a mobile-ready site, so you don't have to download anything, and it is available online for anyone to look at. It's shiftchange.us, and the front-facing part of it is a map. And if people come, and anyone can report an instance of like discrimination or abuse. We have a whole reporting system, and then someone on the back end reviews that. We'll probably contact you to kind of follow up. We are just tracking incidents in Chicago, so we don't have the capacity to track what's happening in other states or other cities, really. But the map is the front end. So if someone comes and reports something, we review it on the back end. And then if that person gives us permission to, we can publish that story, and that will then appear on the public-facing map. So what you see when you go to shiftchange.us is you see the reports that workers have agreed to share with us.
Right. And then part of the back work that you guys are doing is having these conversations with the workers and getting their permission. And is there some kind of vetting process that happens also?
You mean like vetting in terms of like their experiences and what they're...
Yeah.
I mean, it's an extensive reporting system. There's probably like 20 or so different questions.
Super thorough.
Yeah, very thorough. There's all kinds of different range of like questions, both from identity, location, what happened to you in different ways that we kind of asked what you are experiencing throughout the reporting system. So in terms of like fact checking, like how do we prove that this happened to you? That isn't something that's baked into the system. We kind of believe that workers who are coming forward and sharing experiences with us are being vulnerable and honest and trusting us with their experiences. So in terms of like fact checking if this really happened, we don't have a system for that. But I think, like I said, the report isn't like a just 2-3 questions. It's pretty extensive. So our hope is that anyone who's kind of putting forth the energy to file that report in the first place, like, you know, also asking for help and sharing your experience isn't always an easy thing to do. And people are definitely afraid of retaliation. So we kind of just practice that we believe workers and we just show up with the support that they need. On that end, we do take out any personal information. So if someone were to say like, my boss, John, did this to me, we're going to take out John's name. We'll remove any kind of identifying markers. And that, again, is in an effort to protect the worker and also to protect us.
Yeah.
So we still publish that report, but we'll take out certain details.
Definitely. That makes a lot of sense. And also, I imagine that being on the back end and seeing all of these reports coming in, the stories don't seem unusual. They might seem like part of a pattern of behavior or maybe just an industry-wide standard in some way.
Yeah. I mean, some of the places that we receive reports from are the same places. And, you know, when you hear from different people similar experiences, whether they're from similar locations or underneath certain management, it paints a broader picture, and it makes it easier to believe the worker when you have like all of this like supporting proof and experiences around it. But 2, that's exactly what we're looking for.
Definitely. And I guess just to take a step back, I know that you also have worked in the restaurant industry here in Chicago, and that must inform the work that you do. Could you maybe say a little bit about your history working in restaurants and how you kind of use that to inform the work that you want to do with CHAAD?
Yeah. So I have about 12 years of experience working in restaurants. My first job, I was a dishwasher at 15. And then I've worked front and back of house positions as a pastry cook. I've been a host, a server, a bartender. Most of that experience has been in Chicago. And it's really like my experiences that has fueled my work with CHAAD. The CHAAD project was founded by myself and my colleague at the time. And part of the reason why I think the CHAAD project got the attention that it did when it initially started was that it was an organization started by hospitality workers for hospitality workers. So I think people felt seen and affirmed and heard in that. We weren't just a charity. We weren't some outside voices coming in and trying to speak for the industry. We were very much baked into this industry. A lot of the issues that we raised and still do raise when it comes to the CHAAD project are really just fed from our own experiences and being tired of being treated like this and wondering, like, yeah, why can't this change? We have so much, hospitality workers have such love for the industry and for the restaurants that we work in. Why can't we be treated just a little bit better?
Yeah, I think it's really an important question to be asking. And I think one of the things that I really appreciate about your work is being able to see this map and engage with restaurants in that kind of way, because I think we're at a point in food media where maybe there's more reporting happening about issues organizing a union at a restaurant or a chef who has bad behavior. But then at the same time, you read a review and it doesn't have anything to say about like what the labor practices are in that restaurant. I feel like sometimes as someone that goes to restaurants, sometimes I know, oh, this is like a worker-owned establishment, or I have heard about the chef being a good person, but I think sometimes it can be unclear about like what your money is actually going towards or like what is happening on the other side of the restaurant.
Sustainability is something that people are starting to care a lot about. They care about buying more local products. They care if their food is organic. They care about, recycled materials, vegan products. I want that sense of like ethical consumption to also bleed into the people's whose hand is making the product, who's giving you the service. And I think hospitality is a very easy one because it is so human-centered. Those are actually individuals making your food and bringing it to you. So I think it should be only natural to like try to extend that sensibility to the people that are providing you a service.
Definitely. I want to talk a little bit about worker education because I know that's a big thing that CHAAD does. What kinds of topics or issues are you doing a lot of education around these days?
Yeah, lately it's a lot of know your rights trainings. What we're seeing is that workers are facing a lot of the same abuses and aren't even aware that what they're facing is illegal, that what their owner or management is doing to them is against the law, and they have legal protections. So one of the things that we're seeing a lot through the CHAAD project is wage theft, that people are getting, specifically front of house workers, are getting their tips taken, or we're having undocumented folks saying that they aren't being paid their adequate wages or they aren't being paid overtime. Those things are illegal. There are laws in place to protect you against that, but workers are not aware of those laws. And so a huge part of our education platform right now is just like, these are the basic laws that are in place to protect you. And if these things are happening to you, these are the steps that you need to take in order to protect yourselves and your colleagues. And then outside of that, we do a lot of like cultural and wellness education. So just about like taking more care of your body. The industry, it's hard physical labor. It's also a lot of mental and emotional labor. Depending on your identities, sometimes that makes your job harder. If you're a Black person, if you have disabilities, if you don't speak any English, it just makes your job a little bit harder. So we do a bit of education also around just pushing for not only workplaces that follow the laws, but then even further workplaces that treat you better holistically as a human being. Like everyone deserves a place that like bare minimum is following the law and keeps you safe. But what if we also push for places that treated you just a bit more gently and more holistic as a human being?
Right. And is that things like providing healthcare for employees and having time off and those kinds of things?
Absolutely. Healthcare is huge. Time off is huge. A lot of places don't honor workers' right to a break. So even just being able to sit down for 15 minutes during your shift as a huge shift in your mental, emotional capacity. But long term, if you do this job for decades and you're not taking your 15, 20-minute breaks, that erodes your body. So we do talks about that. We do education around just gender and racial identities, pronoun usage. Such a thing that should be so commonplace is often disregarded in restaurants. So we definitely push people and advocate for gender and racial inequities to kind of just look at all the different fronts that workers are facing injustices within the industry. And even if it might not be illegal, is it right?
Yeah. Wow. That last question is a really good one to be asking. It might not be illegal, but is it right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like most people don't ever ask that question.
And I think those are the subtle ways that the industry kind of ticks at you, these little offenses. Sure, we have the big ones, obviously your employer stealing your wages, but the little ones really compound and make it harder and harder to stay in an industry that you might really, really enjoy.
Yeah. So while we're talking about problems in the restaurant industry, it doesn't really matter that we're in Chicago, but we are in Chicago, which is where the Bear is set, which I think is such a interesting vehicle for a way that a lot of people who don't have experience working in the restaurant industry, who don't know people in the industry, have become maybe more aware if they already kind of knew the bad chef reputation of a lot of these problems and practices. And after the second season, I believe you wrote a piece for Eater that was kind of about how this rise of representation of the dark side of restaurants in pop culture like the Bear is not necessarily a positive thing on its own. I'm wondering if you could maybe unpack that with me.
Yeah. I think we recognize this with other traumas and other industries. I think folks are starting to understand what trauma porn in relation to Black trauma and Black experiences look like. When we see the same narrative about the Black American experience over and over and over again, but there's no shift in how we view and treat Black people, we're starting to see that as exploitation, right? And I think what I was trying to do with that piece is just show that's the same parallel here. The Bear does an excellent job at portraying the restaurant industry, even in small ways of drinking out of deli cups and the ways that we talk to each other as restaurant workers. And I love to see everyday workers and their experiences portrayed on the screen. But I want that to go further. I don't want people just to consume our traumas and abuses and then it doesn't lead to anything. I would hope that people's awareness in these issues would then push them to engage with the restaurant industry in a way that is beneficial to workers. So what I would love to see from a show like The Bear or other shows that maybe are more authentic with how they represent the restaurant industry, to provide examples of how consumers can engage with the industry, but also showing tales of, the workers combating the injustices. What if there was a subplot in The Bear that had some workers trying to organize their workplace or striking or really standing up to an abusive chef in a way that bettered their working conditions? It just doesn't feel good to finish your day at work that feels really shitty and come home and try to unwind from a show and just to see your trauma displayed through a show that also has no resolve. It's just kind of in this constant cycle. So I just would like to see more future building and dreaming towards solutions in the industry versus just using the dark side of the industry.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it's interesting in how the trauma that Carmi and the Bear experiences working in these fine dining restaurants is almost set up. It's not I don't want to say the word excuse, but it's the reason for why he's behaving in another way. And then they just kind of leave it there. And I think you're right that, that is the standard of the industry for such a long time. So showing it isn't really pushing it forward. It's just kind of regurgitating the status quo. And there are people all across the country, around the world, that are trying to make better change in their industry in different ways.
Yeah. Or even like what with him, I think to your point, it was great. He comes from fine dining and this is why he is the way he is. So what would a plot look like where he's kind of trying to shift fine dining and unravel the toxic culture that already exists in there? It's kind of portrayed as like going to this mom and pop's shop is the solution to the problems up at the top. But then, it has its same kind of issues regardless of the location. So just would have loved to see more, just really trying to turn the industry on its head and dreaming of ways that workers could push for a more ethical, working conditions.
I guess just listening to you talk about how you hope that certainly people who watch this show, but also diners at restaurants in general, can be kind of pushing for better change in the industry. I'm wondering if there are any examples of either like restaurants or groups that you think are making positive change, or questions that diners should even be asking when finding a restaurant. Because I do find that it is still difficult to really understand what is happening in the workplace, even though there's so much information about where the food is coming from.
I think it's different for every person. As far as like restaurants or groups that I think are doing a great job, there's this organization called High Road Restaurants, and they're pushing for the abolishment of the tipped wage, but also to raise the wage of tipped workers to a $15 minimum. And so they do have a group, they have a number of restaurants, a couple dozen, I believe, restaurants who are like committed to being high road restaurants. There's a few in Chicago and then some in a couple of other states. I think there is a push for some restaurants to be more transparent around where the money is going. What are the wages of the workers? Do people have health insurance? I think those are important things for consumers to pay attention to. I think with any form of consumption, the more local you can be, the better. So obviously, chain or large group restaurants are probably not going to be that much better than like your local run place. Some of my favorite restaurants in Chicago have had the same staff working there for about a decade or so.
That is a great indicator, I think, that people are being treated well if they stick around.
That's another conversation with workers sometimes the big corporations can offer you more benefits than the small local restaurant just because they have more access to resources and money. But sometimes the smaller places, one, they're a bit more transparent about the money they have to offer. And then two, it can be a better environment holistically. So even though you might not be getting these amazing bonuses or benefits, you want to stay for the long term because you're just treated as a human being.
Radical concept.
For sure. So yeah, local is best. And I would say get to know your restaurant workers. When I travel, my go-to source of where I'm eating is servers and bartenders. So I usually find like a cafe or a bar. And if they're not too busy, I ask them where they go and eat. And that's a huge indicator for me of the spots that I want to pay attention to.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because, like, to me, the immediate answer is, if they work in food, they know good food. But also, if they work in food, they know other people who work in food. So they probably are going to places that the workers themselves are having a good experience at.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you have any thoughts about, like, worker-owned, like, co-op models, because I find that to be really interesting, but also something that isn't very widely spread.
It isn't something very widely spread. It's definitely something that I would like to see more of. There's a couple of places in Chicago. I can't remember the name of the place right now.
That's okay.
Birmisuus? It's a weird name. That's why I said I don't remember, but it's only because I don't know how to pronounce it. But it's like a tap room. I believe they're worker owned, which is really cool. Other than that, there's conversations of groups wanting to build something like that. One of our long-term goals for the CHAAD project is to build out a worker co-op model, kind of an alternative to hospitality. Something that we've really seen in this work is that there's so many systemic issues that is the reason why the restaurant industry is the way it is. The business model forces you to exploit people in order to be the most profitable. So we've really been dreaming about what alternatives to that business model would look like, and definitely looking at horizontal structures, shared profits, open books. That's very much I think, a dream in the dreaming stages, but it's exciting.
Yeah, I love to be in the dreaming stages. I'm curious if there are any other dreams for the future of CHAAD that you'd want to share.
We want a joy fund for workers. This is an idea that we came up with in our last strategy session in Mexico City, actually. I think I shared with you, like, we do a base level of education on, like, your legal rights, but also you should be treated like this as a human. And part of that is just treating people the way that they really deserve to be treated. So one of those dreams is we want a joy fund set up where workers can come and get recreational classes paid for. So you're a restaurant worker and you want to take a pottery class, or you want to learn archery or learn how to play the piano, we would pay for you to take those classes and just really help workers indulge in, other avenues of play and rest and taking care of themselves so that they can go and take better care of people when they go back to their jobs.
I love that idea. That's really like wholesome and sweet and necessary. And I think it's interesting to be kind of allowing people to do something besides like going to eat or drink at another restaurant, but it's something that's like kind of separate.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you could tell every hospitality worker in the country one thing and every like hospitality owner or manager in the country one thing, what each of those things would be.
I think my thing to both of them is like the same but opposite. To restaurant workers, I would say you're genius. You're totally capable and intelligent and hardworking and brilliant, and you are the reason why the industry thrives. And then to owners, I would say, like, I wish that y'all would recognize the genius of your staff and their capability and capacity to come up with ideas on how to improve your business, the profits there, but also improve it in a way that is beneficial to them.
Well, I don't know if they're all going to listen, but anyone who's listening to the podcast hopefully will sit with that for a while. And to close our episode today, I want to play a little like taste check game with you, Reagan. I'll give you a category and then you can tell me like the first answer that pops into your head.
Okay.
Okay. Your favorite eating neighborhood in Chicago?
Pilsen.
Your favorite Chicago bar?
Richard's. It's like a dive bar.
I love a dive bar.
Okay.
Is it an extra good dive bar or?
It's like just one of those neighborhood bars where if you live in the neighborhood, you know it's there, and nothing special about the menu. It's just like shitty beers and cheap shots.
But it's exactly what you need.
Exactly what you need.
Your favorite Chicago restaurant?
I was told I wasn't able to share my favorite restaurant.
You can't play favorites?
No, they were afraid that it would get too famous if I said it on a podcast.
Oh my God.
I'm going to share it anyway. Everyone who's in Chicago already knows of it. So Rootstock is my favorite Chicago restaurant.
Okay, I don't know about it. So what's the quick pitch on why it's your favorite?
It is a small wine bar on the west side of Chicago. The people have been working there for like 10 plus years. Like the owner works there almost every day. Small food menu, about 10 items. Don't try to do more. Really nice wine lists. And they just really care about the hospitality and the service. Like if you go in there, the chairs are mismatched and some of them are kind of falling apart. The tableware is all different. I actually went in there the other day and my plate was really cute. It was like a vintage plate. And I asked the owner, I was like, where do you go buy your plates? And he said Village Discount, which is a thrift store.
The best thrift store, yeah.
Where you can get plates for like $1. So yeah. I don't know. I love it that there's no there's no pretentiousness with it. It's just like, here you have good food and good wine and people who love to do what they do. And I can't be upset with that.
It does sound like the best Chicago restaurant. Okay, your favorite Chicago coffee shop?
It's technically not a coffee shop. It sort of is. They have coffee. I like Map Room, which is a beer bar, but they do have coffee all day. Coffee shops are hard for me, but for some reason I love the Map Room.
I like that you can have a beer and a coffee at the same time.
Exactly. When I was in college, I would go there to study.
Yeah, you have both options.
Exactly. I would get a coffee to start it off, and then when I finished studying, I would reward myself.
Love it. Okay, Lou Malnati's or Giordano's?
I've never had either.
Wow. When I wrote that, I was like, either they're going to have a really strong opinion or they're not going to care about deep dish.
I don't care about deep dish. I think I've had Pequod's, which is another deep dish place, but yeah, I'm not really a deep dish person.
Okay, I'll just say on the mic that I went to college in Chicago and I lived really close to a Lou Malnati's, so that's where my allegiances lie, but I just think it's because I ate like so much of it when it was snowing. Okay, your favorite cookbook?
So my go-to actually when I need a recipe is to text all my chef friends and whoever responds.
Your contacts.
Yes. I'm like, who knows how to make this? Please share.
Okay, something you'll never make from scratch.
Cooking is not my favorite thing. So technically a lot of things, but pasta. I hate making pasta from scratch except for gnocchi. I'll make gnocchi. Any other kind of pasta, no.
Call your chef friends.
Exactly. Call your chef friends and invite me.
And finally, a restaurant that's not in your neighborhood that you wish could magically be your neighborhood restaurant.
So my favorite restaurant in my neighborhood closed recently.
You could reopen it as part of the
I would
fantasy.
want to reopen it. Creed's, which is a Southern food place. I miss your mac and cheese and your smoked chicken and your cabbage, and I think about you every day.
Wow. Well, I'm going to be thinking about that too. And I'm going to be thinking about a lot of this conversation. I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking with me. And I hope that everyone who's listening will sit with it as well. And I'll drop a bunch of links to CHAAD's work in the show notes as well.
I appreciate you making space. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Michelman, welcome to This Is Taste. It's so great catching up, man. You're a fixture here on Taste, and I love working with you. You're the co-founder of Sprudge and a real leading light in coffee writing, but you also write fiction. And man, we will have you in the studio, but I want to have this conversation focus on NA beer. You've written this terrific piece, and you call it the most exciting category in drinks today. So catch us up on like NA beers over the past 5 years. You write about it so colorfully. I'm linking to it in the show notes. Definitely go read the piece. And why do you think NA has grown? NA beer has grown so quickly.
I've unexpectedly become kind of not just the writer, but also a client. Like I'm also like just a stan of NA beers. I think they're really good, and all this interesting growth has happened in it over the last 7 or 8 years, and then really reaching a big velocity in the last 5 years. And some of that is growing interest in sort of wider conversations around like sober bar culture, zero proof, yada yada, and all the rest of it. But there's also some kind of like more concrete, sort of technological innovation down to it, which is the work that the brewing company Athletic Brewing figured out, which was a style of brewing any beer. The way it's been explained to me, almost it's essentially brewing a full normal beer and then pulling off at the process right at the very end before all the alcohols arrive in the brewing process. So you wind up with a fully flavored beer that just hasn't been finished in terms of alcohols. And so it's under 0.5% and lands as like an NA beer. I think really what they figured out was this idea of saying NA beer is something that could taste good. Like it doesn't need to just be like sort of the sad old Klaus Tauber or O'Doul's or like these sort of old brands, which were made in a different style in which the alcohol was like boiled off.
And it was extremely skunky and just not a great experience if you ever tried it.
A lot of them are like way too sweet, or it almost tastes like you're drinking kvass or something. They're like these like bread waters. It's this weird thing. Whereas what Athletic was able to figure out was beer that really tasted like beer and could actually have like typicity in beer style. So like your NA golden ale tasted like a golden ale, your NA IPA tasted like an IPA. But that process that they figured out was not patentable, much to their chagrin. And now dozens and dozens of other companies, from very large national breweries to like really small little indie guys, have sort of rushed into the space, all kind of picking up on this idea of like that brewing style. And we've seen some of the largest beer brands in the world also really up game with sometimes they're beers that are made down south, sometimes they're beers where the alcohol is removed by reverse osmosis, which doesn't impact the flavor in a really negative way. And yeah, all of a sudden, what was a category in drinks that nobody really paid any attention to at all, has become a space where there's been this sober gold rush into it of so many different beers in different styles and different big breweries and small breweries. And it's the kind of thing where the offering has just grown so much so quickly. And I think that's really exciting from a consumer perspective, and it is certainly exciting from a like drinks writing perspective.
Yeah, it's such a good point, and I think we all kind of won in this lack of patentability for the athletic company, and they're doing great. You know, if you go to any grocery store, any market, you're going to see a stack of athletic there. And really, what I've observed, and you write about it, and you can kind of expand, but you know, a lot of times when these categories get big and there's a lot of copycats, we end up seeing just so much bad stuff in the market. And for any beer, it's been shocking that how great the quality has been. Even the small guys who are just like figuring it out on the fly are creating some incredible brews that for us, like, you know, for me who doesn't drink alcohol, I'm able to drink like sour beers, Guinness. I'm able to, you know, split the G in my own way. I'm like able to try even like cervezas, like the Mexican beers are tasting like Mexican beers, and so it's really just refreshing to have this category just bloom so quickly.
Yeah, and the blooming has happened in all these different kinds of ways. Like, you know, you've sort of got, I think, breweries like Athletic or Best Day Brewing or things like the Zero Guinness or the Heineken Zero, which is outstanding, or the Corona Zero, which is actually very good. And you get to put the lime in it, and it comes in the same kind of bottle. You know, it's like it feels very fun and it's permissive. And I think it's important, you know, for people who are approaching it from the POV of not drinking alcohol. They are delicious beverages of their own standing, regardless of what your relationship happens to be like at that given moment with alcohol. And something I really wanted to try to talk about with the informed readers at Taste is to be able to be like, yeah, this stuff is delicious. Like, it's really fun and really interesting, almost like superseding the NA part of the conversation. Like, they're all just really good beers.
It's so true, Jordan, because, you know, you're hearing in bars, and I've talked to folks who own restaurants and bars about NA beers, and like, you know, it's not for sober dudes. It's for all people who want to maybe take a round off, who've maybe had a cocktail, who've had an aviation, and they're like, okay, I'm good with one aviation. I'm gonna head and have a best day and to wind up my night. And I feel like this is modern drinking. It's really how folks, I think, are thinking about their alcohol consumption. Measured and better is kind of what I'm observing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'll share, for me personally, I have a number of people in my life that I'm really close with and consider dear friends who don't drink, but we like to still go out. I mean, you like to go to a bar, be in a room full of people. And so when I go out with them, I don't really want to drink either. That's not what's important to me. What's important to me is that we're all hanging out. And so that's what's really been fun for me, is drinking a lot of cool NA beers in those kinds of situations, because I not feel like I'm missing out at all. And actually, it's kind of fun. And yeah, I mean, I've had some great, you know, traveling around. We talked about on the story, you know, all the different regional, I love traveling somewhere and having a local beer, you know, and being able to do that with NA beers is really fun.
Let's talk about the actual product testing you did for this piece. It was really rigorous, and you really dove in, and we all benefit from it. How much did you end up drinking and buying? And like, were you buying at local? You live in Portland, Oregon, so were you buying at physical retail shops? Or were you buying online? I know it's a little easier to buy NA beers online. And really, how good and not good was like I think you said you tasted maybe 60 beers.
Yeah, for sure. By the end of it, probably around 60 individual beers, some from the same breweries, and then some from, you know, one-offs from breweries and stuff. And I think I really kind of traveled around with the story over the course of the last 6 months. I've kind of packed it up in my pocket and taken it with me to different places. So drinking cool NA beers, running around bars in New York and down in Southern California and out in the United Kingdom, and then also here in Portland where I live. In Portland, I should shout out this place. There's this awesome like beer world mega store called John's Marketplace. Actually, there's one that's in the city and one that's out in the suburbs. And they have, I mean, just a whole galaxy of every kind of beer from every corner of the world. and tons of little indie locals and like a cool beer bar inside of it or whatever. But they have more than 200 individual SKUs of NA beer now available, plus dozens more of like hop waters and other kind of interesting stuff, which is like, I think the next set of conversations. Like hop water is also really interesting.
We'll get into hop water to not like, confuse this conversation. It's a different category. It's like kind of adjacent, but I definitely think the hop water movement has been extremely cool too.
Dude, I tried a ton of beers, and the ones that I had, like, there was some that I had that I was maybe, I wouldn't say I had anything that I thought was like actively bad. There was maybe ones that I was a little disappointed by. I think it can be sort of hard. I mean, beer is beer, whether it's NA or not. And there's some in the IPA category, especially. I had some NA beers that were, the IPNAs is what they're sort of cheekily get called. Where like I was like, this is almost an IPA, but it's like not quite bitter enough, or it feels like it's sort of holding back a little bit. And then I had other ones where I was like, this is that thing. This is doing that bittering thing that I want an IPA to do, which is interesting, and it happening in an AA context. So definitely, like, that was the part of the category that I maybe tried the most within to figure out which was the one that I was going to say, or one or two that I was going to say that like would be a good fit for like shouting out in the story. And there was some that I had that I was like, I think these are just okay. And then there's some that I had where I was like, this is really good.
Love it. So we in the piece, and you definitely should check out the link and get the full rundown. But I'd like to get a general sense, maybe like your favorite beer or two in these categories. And we're going to start with what you've called the best of the big guys. Is there like a favorite of yours?
I think the Guinness Zero is outstanding. And drinking that Guinness Zero in the context of like being at a pub or like at a British bar, or like watching the Euro soccer tournament or something with your friends, like it's delicious. It tastes great. It tastes great with food. It tastes great in the atmosphere. I think it's got so much to recommend to it, and I appreciate that everything about it it pours the same. It's got the foam. It comes in the can with the widget. I mean, really every part of that experience is just like drinking a classic Guinness. The other one that I think is great is Heineken, the Heineken Zero. I had an experience out at a bar in New York City. We were at Macho Monday at a gay bar in the Lower East Side, and we ordered 2 Heineken Zeros. And the bartender said, "Sure, here you go." And we started drinking them, and we got about halfway through, and we looked at the bottles, and we were like, "Oh wait, these are normal Heinekens. They didn't give us Heineken Zeros; they gave us normal Heinekens." And then they gave us Heineken Zeros and apologized, and we started drinking them. And we were like, "This is." If we hadn't looked at the bottle, we would have never known.
Oh, wow.
Like, it is indistinguishable. I mean, it does every crispness, and it's got kind of hydrating, but it's beer. And like, there's this, like, the calorie count of it's the same. Like, everything about it is like weirdly identical. And I mean that as a compliment. Like, it really is just like drinking a Heineken.
Okay, the next category is lifestylers.
Best Day Brewing, which I think has come on really strong in terms of, I just see those beers all over. There's quite a lot of access to them all around the country. And the Best Day Kolsch is quite good.
So good. When I saw that's a California brewery, and I was just down in Atlanta, Georgia, at like a house we had rented, and one of the folks who was staying with us brought a whole Best Day case, and like the thing was gone by the end of the night. Everyone was drinking these NAs. It was so cool.
Yeah, it's outstanding. I've liked all of the Best Day beers that I've had. In particular, I think their Kolsch, especially in the summertime, it's really best of class. Like, very, very good.
So you have a category called regional, and I think that means kind of like smaller, maybe more boutique. Maybe bring some names that maybe we don't know about, folks who are listening who definitely know NA, but maybe there's some really good ones to seek out.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of that idea of like, if I'm traveling somewhere, I always think it's fun to drink whatever it is that you like to drink that you can only get there, right? Like the the wine you might only find there, the beer you might only find there, or whatever. And the NA category has grown enough that you're starting to have that stratification, right? Like you're starting to have these NA beers that you could only find in a certain place. I was in Texas a couple of months ago for the Hot Lock Festival at the end of May. And while I was there, I started seeing around this really cool, it's called Rick's Near Beer. And I'd never seen it before, and come to realize it's only available in Texas. It's brewed in Austin, and they are delicious. It is like a crisp Texas lager, would taste great with tacos or barbecue. I had one get built into a michelada at a restaurant there in Austin called Este. That was like, I think about it every day. Like it was one of the greatest drinks I've ever had. Like NA or not, beer or not, cocktail or not, or whatever. Just as like a beverage, a consumable beverage, this michelada that they make at Este. And you can get it with a Mexican cerveza, or you can get it with this Rick's Near Beer. And it was so, so good. So in another cool regional beer in Southern California at the Great Erewhon, which depending on if you believe the same couple thousand people on Instagram, is, the godhead through which all food and drink trends is reflected and refracted. They don't have a ton of NA beer there, which I think is telling, but I did try this cool brand called Rancho West, which is brewed out in Malibu and is doing this very kind of like Cali lifestyle beer. They're interesting. They're one of like, I think, a growing style of brewery where they make an NA beer, but they also make conventional beers. And I thought their like Rancho West lager was quite good, and kind of gave me a Cali feeling. I drank one at like a cool Cali restaurant and thought it was like all kind of like felt very appropriate in California.
I love that. It's very similar to St. Agrestis, the way that St. Agrestis, the company that makes the phony Negroni, is also making their own Amaros, and they have a whole like bottled Negroni movement, but they're also doing this NA. So I think it's cool when you get these smaller distilleries or breweries that do both, and they do both equally well. It's cool.
There was one other regional one that kind of came on at the end. I had been trying so much stuff and was getting really close to kind of closing copy on the story or whatever, and then like one last thing came in at the end, and I ended up really impressed by it, which is from Good Time Brewing, which is in New York. And they are just an NA dedicated brewery. I think it's a fairly new company. And they make my favorite IPA that I tasted for the story. And I just am sort of already like dreaming about getting some like summer New York park, like gentle dirtbag time, drinking my like half rack of these Good Time Brewing IPNAs that they make. It's a really good product, and New York listeners should seek that out in their classy bodega of choice.
That's very cool. And another New York brand I like is Al's Ale. I'm sure if you tasted that one in your testing, but that's another one that comes to mind for me. Jordan, do you have a best overall that like just in all categories that we should seek out, that we should just order whenever we see it automatically?
The Hitachino Nest, like from that brewery in Japan. I tried it for the story and was like, okay, I'm going to include it. And then just a couple of days ago, I was at a friend's surprise 40th birthday party in Portland, which was very fun. They had the Hitachino Nest. It was a very hot day, and we were outside. And I drank like 3 of them, and it tastes so good. It's this like yuzu ginger non-alcoholic beer that they make out there in Japan. And I think that beer is fantastic. So if you ever see that somewhere, drink it. It's delicious. I really rate very highly everything that they make at a brewery called Self Care, which is in Olympia, Washington, kind of out in my neck of the woods here in the Northwest, but can be shipped anywhere you want in the country. An interesting thing about all these NA beers is that you can just buy them on the internet like soda pop. You do not have to go through a 3-tier alcoholic sales and distribution outdated market for how stuff gets bought and sold for alcohol in America. You can just buy them and they will ship them straight to your house at minimal cost, which is one of the interesting things about this particular drinks category. One of the things that I think has helped it like grow and be as successful it has been is that there is like good economics behind it, like that can work for breweries. Yeah, Self Care is it's the non-alcoholic label of a very well-regarded brewery in Olympia called Three Magnets. It's won every kind of award and helped kind of popularize some hazy ales back a decade ago, or hazy IPAs and stuff. A really great brewery. And they spun off some like pandemic relief money into being like, okay, we're going to try to make this NA brewery. And has had a bunch of success with it and a bunch of growth with it. And they basically make now an NA version of almost every style of beer they brew at Three Magnets. So you can have, citrus cervezas and hazy IPAs and, gozas and all these kind of like obscure beer styles that they're doing NA versions of, which is really cool. And I've never had a bad beer from them. Their Italian Pilsner is absolutely delicious. Everything I've ever had from them, I think, is really top class. And they're one that, like, to other people I know who are NA beer geeks or people who are seeking out cool NA beers, they're sort of the first thing I'm like, order stuff from them. I think the beers are fantastic. You will not be disappointed.
Love that rec. Read the piece. There's links throughout it that you can buy from. Definitely take Jordan's advice. I want to transition a little bit and close this conversation. Talk about some of your other beverage writing on Taste. You're really, truly one of the best writers in the industry when it comes to not just wine and spirits, but diving into mineral water. You've won a James Beard Award for your work at Punch. You wrote a great piece about mineral water, and you've continued to write on Taste about mineral water. And I really encourage you, and I hope you write more, write longer. I'd love to get a sense. It's another NA category in essence, but I just returned from Greece and I had some incredible bottles and I was like texting you along the way. Give us some tips to our listeners. Maybe they're out there going to Europe on vacation, heading to Italy, heading to Greece. How can we have a great mineral water experience when visiting countries? And on the second part is, how do we buy it in the States?
Yeah. Okay. So for travel to Europe, mineral water is your friend. And actually, I think everybody's always looking for that way when they're traveling to not look like a schnook, to like not look like an ugly American or a rube. And being excited about mineral water where you are and asking about it is actually a really good sign. Like, so it's a cool thing to know about and ask for. And you got to just make like a whale, keep your mouth open the whole time and let every single kind of water float its way through while you're there. Try as much as you possibly can. And if you do it right, especially somewhere like Italy or Greece or God, anywhere in Eastern Europe, but also in the UK and Spain and all the rest of it, you can drink a different cool mineral water every day. A lot of them will be stuff that we don't get back in America, which is really fun. It's not like, these days, you travel around and it's the same 100 bottles of natural wine in Brooklyn as it is in Paris, and it's like, why did I fly for 8 hours for, this is all the same shit. But water's not like that. A lot of it doesn't travel and really geolocates. It's maybe one of the last cool drinks things that like truly geolocates. You have to go to a place to get it and drink it. And like when you were in Greece, I was looking at all these cool bottles I'd never even seen before, much less be able to buy stateside. So I think that's really fun. Ask about it. Do it every restaurant, every little bodega, every grocery store, everywhere you go. Try as much as you possibly can, because it's one of those things that like a lot of times you can only get them there, and that's part of like what's fun in travel. Back in the States, it's a little bit more telescoped, and you're much more likely to kind of run into the Nestle hegemony of being like Aquapana or Pellegrino or Perrier or whatever, which are actually all good waters, to be clear, and real mineral waters, spring waters, like delicious. But it is definitely a little flattened for what's there for availability. The place that I've written about this before for Taste, that I keep going back to is like European import grocery stores, Eastern European grocery stores, or sometimes get called like continental markets, or like they'll use the term like a Russian grocery store, but it isn't really Russian. It's sort of, oftentimes they're kind of pan-Soviet, pan-Slavic grocery stores. But that's where you'll find, of the mineral waters of Eastern Europe, and only a small percentage of them are imported, but Essentuki and Borjomi, some of the really cool mineral waters that are from Armenia or from the Ukraine. That's where you're likely to find those waters, is in like Eastern European grocery stores. They are your friend if you enjoy water.
Yeah, I want to shout Azuno Nepo in Athens. I was drinking that all day. I don't know if you tried that one.
I haven't. I've never seen it in America.
Yeah, I know. And I talked to some guys about getting it. I was trying to like figure it out, but to your point, you just can't get it in the States, and it's really great. And I probably should have asked this at the beginning, but really, when you're tasting mineral water, give us a sense of how you judge it and how you prize it, because I think it's a little abstract, right? Because we do drink a lot of waters that aren't mineral water that are from a source, but they've been the flavor has been kind of taken out through processes, osmosis, etc. But give us a sense of what you should be looking for and how you taste it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're all a little different. Some of what you're setting yourself up to do is kind of an exercise in subtlety, right? Like you're saying, okay, well, water's a water, but it's not just water, right? Like that's the thing that Martin Rees, the guy who's the water sommelier, he talks about all the time. This idea of water being as diverse of a product category in terms of flavor experiences and texture and how it feels to drink it and what it pairs with as beer or as wine, that there's this great diversity of experience in it. And some of that requires a little bit of letting the puzzle shift in your mind for how you think about water. But I think it also just comes from trying lots of different things and realizing that this water might taste kind of heavy or almost sort of oily, or this water might be a little bit more taste like it's clean, or like it's raining outside and you went and stood and opened your mouth and drank the rain. There's all different kinds of experiences. A lot of times that can be sort of tracked down to like how many dissolved minerals there actually are in the water. Like I have a water that I'm sitting here looking at right now that comes from Essentuki Old Source number 17. And when I sit and I look at it, like there's 5 servings per container in this bottle. It's a 500 milliliter bottle. And one of those servings has 2,700 milligrams of potassium, which is 60% of my daily serving. So if I drank this entire bottle in one sitting, I would have like 4x'd my potassium for the day. There's also like 150 milligrams of calcium in this bottle. So like it's crazy. You're drinking these waters that have more potassium than a banana and more calcium than a glass of milk. And it's water.
Unbelievable. And obviously all of these minerals are playing out on the palate. You're going to be tasting new flavors. And I just encourage you to seek it out. And also, the style of carbonation too changes as well. And we're talking about sparkling or gassy mineral water. You're getting a very different experience there too. So it's almost like you're judging the flavor and the way it's been carbonated.
That's exactly right. And there's some that are naturally carbonated, like they come out of the earth with the carbon dioxide trapped, and so they're naturally carbonated waters. Vichy Catalan from Spain is one of like my personal favorites that is in that style, which also has a very high TDS and is salty and tastes delicious with like good grass-fed beef or like dairy cow beef. It's like amazing combination. But there's other ones where the gas is added, and there's not necessarily one is better than the other. It's just sort of in different styles. Something that's like, this is a little out there. I don't know, this is like a little weird, but like a lot of the waters in Eastern European that are in Eastern Europe that are drunk for health purposes also like are spas where you go and like bathe in the water too. Like not that you're drinking it at the same time that you're bathing in it. Like there's a bottling source and then there's like the part where like the spa happens. But like pouring the water over yourself is also like, I think because of the mineral content, quite rightly has been looked at throughout history as having like potential benefits for like, skin health and for hair health and for things like that. And maybe this is like a little out there for people, but some of these bottled waters, like if you have a sauna in your house or like, or even if you just want to try it in the shower, like if you pour a little bit over your head, you also like get an experience of that water that's kind of really interesting too. And some of them, I swear, you can feel the minerality of it or feel kind of the like the salt and the weight of it on your skin in a way that is also reflected in how you drink it. And that's kind of an interesting way to think about the water.
That's what I like about you, Jordan. You're going to topical applications of mineral water in spas. At home, that's
I like to get. I'm out here in Portland, man. There's not a lot necessarily going on all the time, and shit gets a little weird.
I love it. No, it's exactly why I love working with you, buddy. And just to close quickly, I have to ask you. I couldn't not about coffee.
Oh yeah.
And we could go in many directions, but just give our listeners a couple recs if they're buying coffee online. Are there any coffee companies that are just popping in your head that they should seek out? Maybe I don't know about them either.
Yeah. Well, there's like a couple of these places, I was talking about with water, like, oh, you got to travel somewhere to just sort of find the coffee, right? And it really geolocates. Well, I think that there's some cool companies in America, like cafes, that are bringing in tiny coffee roasters from the other side of the world that like they have the cultural fluency and the connections and the travel to be able to get that otherwise you would have to go there and probably have to like have a hookup or a guide to be able to find what all this cool stuff was. Like here in Portland, we have this really awesome cafe called Electrica that's run by a buddy of mine named Seiji Nanbu. Seiji's from Portland, but his family's from Japan, and he goes back all the time and is bringing in roasters from Japan and like teas, matchas, hojichas, all this awesome tea from Japan. And he's created this little wormhole between Portland and Japan for like what the coffees he's able to serve are and what the teas he's able to serve are that otherwise you really would have to fly over there and like know somebody to go and find. I think another place that's doing that's really pretty amazing is down at Kumquat, the cafe in Los Angeles in Highland Park. They just announced a really cool program that they're doing, I think, for the next month or so of serving like tiny Korean micro roasters that are like, we've maybe written about them once or a couple of them on Sprudge, but there was a bunch that I'd never even seen or heard about before.
That's so rad. I love Kumquat. That place rules. Is Mesh involved in that, or is Mesh not even that small?
I don't know if that was one of the ones. They just posted it all on Instagram, and there was like 7 or 8 of them that I saw, and like I'd heard of a couple of them, and I'm the guy from Sprudge, so I'm supposed to know all this, And there's like a bunch.
Sure. Yeah,
dude, it was really cool. So like that kind of stuff where it's like you couldn't even get it online, but then there's these people in America like at Electrica or Kumquat that are like gonna make the wormhole for you, and then you can get it from them, and that rules. But then the coffees are all gonna be from Ecuador, right, or Colombia, right? So then you're sort of like, it's just it knits together the map of how hyper global. There's nothing you consume that's more international than coffee. And there's something really cool about these places in America that are like setting up the wormhole for you and making it so you can get this stuff that otherwise you would never be able to get. I think that's fun.
I love it, Jordan. I'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Jordan Michael Min, for joining This Is Taste. We'll have you back on. I really appreciate the work on all your journalism on Taste, and it's just a pleasure talking with you.
This Is Taste is hosted by Matt Rodbard and me, Eliza Abarbanel. The show is produced by Shalia Harris and Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on all cool things happening.